The phone rang exactly 28 minutes after I sent the PDF attachment, which was faster than I'd expected but not surprising given the circumstances. I was sitting in the business lounge at Heathrow Airport, waiting for my connecting flight back to New York after closing a deal in London that would net my investment firm approximately $12 million in fees. "Madison, what is this?" My mother's voice was shrill with panic, a tone I hadn't heard since my teenage years when she discovered I'd been skipping chemistry class. "These documents, they can't be real." I calmly took a sip of my espresso and opened my laptop to the mortgage servicing portal where I'd been tracking my parents' payments for the past 18 months. "Hello, Mom. Which documents are you referring to specifically?" "Don't play games with me, young lady. These papers say you own our mortgage." "That's impossible." "Why is it impossible?" The question seemed to stump her momentarily. In the background I could hear my father's voice, though I couldn't make out the words. After 32 years of marriage, my parents had developed a communication system that involved a lot of urgent whispering during crisis situations. Because you're a travel blogger, Madison. You don't have that kind of money." There it was, the assumption that had been driving our family dynamics for the past 4 years. My parents, Linda and Robert Chin, had watched me quit my corporate consulting job to pursue my passion for travel writing and concluded that I was having an extended quarter-life crisis that would eventually require their financial intervention. What they didn't know was that Madison Chin, travel blogger, was just the public face of my business empire. Madison Chin, managing partner of Phoenix Capital Ventures, controlled over $200 million in assets across real estate, technology startups, and strategic investments. "Mom, I'm not just a travel blogger. I run an investment firm." "That's ridiculous. We would have known." "Would you? When was the last time you asked me detailed questions about my work instead of expressing concern about my unconventional lifestyle choices?" This was the crux of our ongoing conflict. My parents had built their entire understanding of my life around blog posts and Instagram photos, never bothering to investigate the business infrastructure that made such extensive travel possible. They saw the pictures from Bali and Barcelona and assumed I was living paycheck to paycheck, funding my adventures through freelance writing and family support. "The mortgage documents are real," I continued, pulling up the acquisition paperwork on my laptop. "I purchased your loan from Capital One Bank 14 months ago through a holding company. You've been making payments to me, though the bank continued servicing the loan to avoid confusion." "This is insane." My father's voice came through clearly as he took the phone from my mother. "Madison, even if this is real, which I don't believe, why would you do something like this without telling us?" It was a fair question with a complicated answer. The simple version was that I'd bought their mortgage as insurance when I learned they were struggling with payments due to my father's reduced hours at the engineering firm. The complex version involved 4 years of accumulated frustration with being treated like a child who couldn't understand adult responsibilities. "I bought it because you were 3 months behind on payments and facing foreclosure," I replied. "I thought you might appreciate keeping your house." 3 months behind? My father's voice rose. "We were not 3 months behind. We had a temporary cash flow issue that we resolved. Dad, I have the bank records. You were 96 days delinquent when I initiated the purchase. The foreclosure notice was scheduled to be filed the following week." The silence that followed told me everything I needed to know. They hadn't told me about their financial difficulties because they didn't want their irresponsible daughter to worry about adult problems. Instead, they had struggled alone while lecturing me about the importance of financial stability and career planning. "Why didn't you tell me you were having money problems?" I asked. "Because it wasn't your concern," my mother said, her voice defensive. "And because we didn't want you to feel pressured to help when you're already living hand-to-mouth yourself." Hand-to-mouth. I almost laughed at the irony. While they worried about my financial stability, I had been quietly building wealth at a rate that would have impressed them if they'd bothered to look beyond surface appearances. "Mom, I haven't lived hand-to-mouth since I was 24. My net worth is approximately $37 million. $37 million what? Dollars. American dollars. As in more money than you and Dad will earn in your combined lifetimes." I heard what sounded like someone sitting down heavily, followed by my father's voice. "That's impossible." "Is it? Dad, you're an engineer. You understand compound interest and investment returns. What do you think happens when someone starts with a decent amount of capital and makes strategic investments over a 4-year period? What capital? You had student loans when you graduated. I had student loans that I paid off in 18 months using profits from my first investment property. Then I used the rental income from that property to purchase 2 more properties. Then I started the investment firm. It's not magic, it's just math and market knowledge. My flight was being called for boarding, but I remained seated. This conversation had been building for 4 years, and it was finally happening whether I was ready or not. The travel blog, I continued, generates about $40,000 annually through sponsorships and affiliate marketing. That covers my travel expenses and some living costs. The investment firm generates the real money. Last year's profit was $8.3 million. $8 million. My mother's voice was barely a whisper. $0.3 million, I corrected. I believe in precision when discussing financial matters. I opened the banking app on my phone and took a screenshot of my primary business account balance. $4.7 million in liquid assets, plus a note indicating this was just the operating account for current investments. I'm sending you a screenshot of one of my business accounts, I said, attaching the image to a text message. This doesn't include the real estate holdings, the stock portfolio, or the equity stakes in startup companies. My phone immediately buzzed with my father's response. Holy shit. Robert. My mother's voice carried clearly through the phone speaker. Linda, our daughter is a millionaire. Multiple times over. I think the situation warrants strong language. This was not how I had planned to reveal my financial situation to my parents. I had imagined a calm conversation over dinner, perhaps with a portfolio summary and a detailed explanation of my investment strategy. Instead, I was having this discussion via international phone call because they had sold my childhood room to strangers without consulting me. About the room, I said, steering the conversation back to the issue that had started this revelation. You texted me that you sold it to strangers and I should pack my things. What exactly did you sell? The house, my mother said quietly. We sold the house. You sold the house while I was traveling? Madison, we've been trying to reach you for weeks about our financial situation. We couldn't keep up with the mortgage payments, and we thought it was better to sell voluntarily than lose it to foreclosure. This was news to me. I checked my phone records and found 3 missed calls from my parents over the past month, all of which had come while I was in meetings or traveling between time zones. I had made a mental note to call them back but had gotten distracted by work demands. Who did you sell it to? A development company. They're planning to tear it down and build condominiums. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. The house where I'd grown up, where my parents had lived for 23 years, was going to be demolished because they were too proud to ask their struggling daughter for help. How much did they offer? $420,000. It's below market value, but we needed to close quickly. I opened my laptop and pulled up the recent comparable sales in their neighborhood. Houses similar to theirs were selling for between $580,000 and $640,000. The development company had taken advantage of their desperation to acquire the property for significantly less than its actual value. Mom, your house is worth at least $600,000 in the current market. You sold it for 70% of its value because you were in distress. We didn't have a choice, my father said, his voice heavy with resignation. We couldn't afford to wait for a better offer. Actually, you did have a choice. You could have asked me for help. Madison, we didn't want to burden you. Burden me with what? The opportunity to help my parents? The chance to use my resources for something meaningful instead of just accumulating more wealth. The irony was overwhelming. For 4 years, my parents had worried about my financial stability while refusing to share their own struggles. They had lectured me about the importance of saving money and building a secure future while hiding the fact that they were facing foreclosure. When is the closing scheduled? I asked. Tomorrow, my mother replied. We're supposed to sign the final papers and vacate by the weekend. I looked at my boarding pass. My flight would land in New York at 6 p.m. local time, giving me roughly 14 hours to unravel a real estate transaction that had been in progress for weeks. Don't sign anything, I instructed. I'm going to fix this. Madison, you can't just. Mom, I own your mortgage. That means I have a legal interest in any sale of the property. The development company can't complete the purchase without my approval as the lien holder. This was true, though I hadn't thought about it until this moment. When I purchased their mortgage, I had acquired certain rights regarding the property, including the ability to block sales that didn't satisfy the loan balance. But we already signed the purchase agreement, my father protested. Purchase agreements are contingent on clear title and lien satisfaction. If I don't release the mortgage, they can't complete the sale. I was already pulling up contact information for my real estate attorney while talking. This would require some creative legal maneuvering, but it was definitely possible. I need to make some phone calls, I said. Don't communicate with the development company or sign any additional documents until you hear from me. And Mom? Yes. Next time you're having financial difficulties, please call me. That's what family is for. After ending the call, I spent the next hour coordinating with my attorney, my banker, and a real estate broker in my parents' area. By the time my flight boarded, I had initiated the process to block the sale and arranged for a proper market evaluation of the property. The flight back to New York gave me time to think about the deeper issues underlying this situation. My parents had nearly lost their house because they were too proud to ask for help from someone they perceived as financially unstable. Meanwhile, I had been so focused on building my business empire that I hadn't noticed they were struggling. Somewhere over the Atlantic, I made a decision that would change our family dynamics permanently. I landed at JFK at 6:47 p.m. and immediately called my parents from the taxi. The sale has been blocked, I announced without preamble. The development company can't complete the purchase without my approval, and I'm not giving it. Madison, what does this mean for us? My mother asked. We still can't afford the house payments. It means you don't have to worry about house payments anymore, I replied. I'm officially transferring ownership of the property to you, free and clear. No mortgage, no monthly payments, no debt. You can't do that, my father protested. It's too much money. Dad, the outstanding mortgage balance is $218,000. I made more than that in profit last week from a single investment. For me, this is like you buying someone a nice dinner. But Madison. No buts. This is happening whether you like it or not. The only question is whether you'll accept it gracefully or make it difficult for everyone involved. My parents were quiet for a long moment, probably trying to process the fact that their irresponsible daughter was casually giving them a house worth $600,000. There is one condition, I continued. You have to stop treating me like a child who doesn't understand money. I've been managing my own finances for over a decade, and I've been more successful at it than either of you realized. We never meant to, my mother started. You did mean to, I interrupted gently. You meant to protect me from what you perceived as adult responsibilities because you thought I was incapable of handling them. But Mom, I've been handling responsibilities that would stress out most adults. Over the next 2 hours, sitting in my Manhattan penthouse apartment, another fact about my life that would probably shock them, I walked my parents through my actual financial situation. I showed them my business portfolio, my investment strategy, and the scope of Phoenix Capital Ventures. You own part of 17 different companies? My father asked, scrolling through the investment summary I'd emailed. Controlling interests in some cases, minority stakes in others. The portfolio is designed for both growth and stability. Some high-risk startups balanced by secure real estate investments and established businesses. And the travel blog? Started as a way to document my business travels and evolved into a legitimate income stream. I write about the places I visit for work and people assume I'm just a travel blogger. It's easier than explaining international investment management to strangers. My mother's voice was small when she spoke next. Madison, why didn't you tell us about any of this? Because every time I tried to talk about my work, you changed the subject to concerns about my lifestyle. You were so convinced that I was making poor choices that you never listened to what I was actually accomplishing. This was the heart of our family's communication breakdown. My parents had created a narrative about my life based on limited information and their own fears about unconventional career paths. They had been so focused on what they thought I should be doing that they missed what I was actually doing. When I quit consulting to start the investment firm, you staged an intervention to discuss my quarter-life crisis. When I bought my first property, you warned me about the dangers of debt. When I started traveling internationally for business, you lectured me about the importance of stability and settling down. We were trying to help, my father said defensively. You were trying to fix something that wasn't broken. Dad, I left consulting because I was making more money from my side investments than from my salary. I bought property because I understood the market opportunity. I started traveling because my business required international partnerships. The conversation continued for another hour, with my parents gradually accepting that their assumptions about my life had been completely wrong. It was like watching someone realize they'd been reading a map upside down for years. "Madison," my mother said finally, "I owe you an apology. We've been treating you like you didn't know what you were doing when you clearly knew better than we did." "Mom, I don't need an apology. I need you to start seeing me as an adult who's capable of making good decisions." "But the house, giving us the house, that's too generous." "No, it's not. You know what would be too generous? Buying you a mansion in the Hamptons. Giving you your current house, which you've been paying on for 23 years, is just correcting an injustice." 3 days later, I flew home to oversee the final paperwork. My parents met me at the airport, and for the first time in years, they looked at me like they were seeing an adult daughter instead of a wayward child who needed guidance. At the title company, we signed the documents transferring full ownership of the house to my parents. The development company had tried to challenge the mortgage blocking, but my attorney had made it clear that they had no legal recourse. "So what happens now?" my father asked as we left the title office. "Now you live in your house without worrying about mortgage payments," I replied. "And hopefully we start having conversations about my actual life instead of the life you think I should be living." That evening we had dinner in the kitchen where I'd eaten thousands of meals growing up. But this time, instead of fielding questions about when I was going to get serious about my career, I found myself explaining investment strategies and international business development. "Madison," my mother said as we cleared the dishes, "can I ask you something about your business?" "Of course. Do you enjoy it? All the travel, the investments, the responsibility." It was the first time she had ever asked me if I was happy with my choices rather than expressing concern about them. "I love it, Mom. I love the challenge of identifying good investments, the satisfaction of helping startups grow, the excitement of international travel. I love building something that's mine." She nodded slowly. "I think your father and I got so focused on traditional measures of success that we forgot to ask if you were building your own version of success." 6 months later, my parents came to visit me in New York. They stayed in my penthouse, toured my office, and met some of my business partners. My father was particularly fascinated by the technology startups in my portfolio, while my mother enjoyed meeting the entrepreneurs I'd helped fund. "You know," my father said on their last evening, "I'm proud of what you've built. I should have said that years ago." "Why didn't you?" "Because it would have meant admitting that I didn't understand what you were doing. And because it's hard for parents to accept that their children have surpassed them." It was the most honest conversation we'd ever had about success, money, and family expectations. My parents still live in the house where I grew up, but now they host dinner parties where they proudly tell friends about their daughter's business achievements. My mother has become one of my travel blog's biggest promoters, and my father regularly sends me articles about investment opportunities he thinks I should consider. The room they had tried to sell to strangers is now my home office when I visit, equipped with everything I need to manage Phoenix Capital Ventures remotely. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's proving that your choices were right while giving the people who doubted you the chance to celebrate your success. But the real victory wasn't the financial revelation or even saving the house. It was the moment my parents stopped seeing me as someone who needed to be fixed and started seeing me as someone they could learn from. Sometimes the most important gift you can give your family isn't money. It's the opportunity to know who you really are.